Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're stepping into the world of traditional Chinese medicine.
Always fascinating.
It really is. We're tackling a pretty big concept this time, understanding the root of disease. And our guide, Chapter 25, from no other than The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine.
Talk about foundational texts.
Right. This is like the bedrock of TCM. It lays out this whole system where the body is seen as this interconnected system constantly seeking balance.
And that's exactly what we're exploring today. How this ancient text views illness, not as a set of symptoms to just get rid of.
Yeah, but rather as clues to a deeper imbalance within the body.
Precisely. So instead of just, say, popping a pill to mask a headache,
we want to uncover what's actually causing it in the first place. Makes sense.
And the text really hits hard on this concept of root versus manifestation. Imagine you have a cough. In Western medicine, you might just try to suppress it.
Right, just silence it.
But in TCM, the first question would be, okay, what's causing this cough? Is it dryness, heat, something else? That's looking for the root, not just treating the symptom.
I'm with you. So how does the text tell us to actually treat that root cause?
There's this line that says, if the illness arises first, followed by symptoms of reversal, treat the root.
Okay, I get the treat the root part, but what are these reversal symptoms?
That's where it gets interesting. Reversal basically means your body is fighting back against the illness. Think of things like fever or sweating.
Unpleasant, for sure.
Yeah. But they're signs that your body is actively trying to expel something harmful or burn away a pathogen.
So they're actually positive signs.
In a way, yes. It means your body is on the right track. So instead of immediately trying to lower the fever or stop the sweating,
TCM would say, support that natural healing response.
Exactly. And that support comes from addressing the root cause that triggered that fight in the first place.
It's really a completely different way of thinking about how the body works. I like it.
It's a paradigm shift.
Totally. But then the text gives all these specific scenarios and examples, right? Like it mentions diarrhea quite a bit.
Right, diarrhea. Now, in TCM, that's not always seen as just a digestive issue.
It has a deeper meaning.
Often, yes. It can be seen as the body purging something harmful, whether that's a pathogen or built-up stress, even an allergen.
That makes sense. The text says, if diarrhea occurs before other conditions develop, treat the root.
Exactly. So the focus isn't on just stopping the diarrhea.
It's about figuring out what's causing it, that root imbalance.
Precisely. And that's where a skilled TCM practitioner steps in. They'll consider the specific type of diarrhea,
Yeah.
color, odor, timing, all the accompanying symptoms.
Like putting together a puzzle.
Exactly. To pinpoint that root cause and come up with a targeted treatment plan.
That whole idea of individualized treatment is fascinating. No one-size-fits-all solutions.
Not in TCM. Everyone is different, and treatment has to be tailored to each individual's circumstances.
I'm starting to see that. And this idea of individual treatment is especially evident when the text distinguishes between illnesses with excess and illnesses with deficiency, right?
Absolutely. That's a fundamental principle in TCM, and it directly impacts how we approach treatment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But how does that play out in a real-life scenario?
Well, let's imagine you have a cold. In TCM, we might call that an invasion of wind cold.
Wind cold. Sounds chilly.
It can be. Now, let's say you have this cold with excess symptoms.
What would those be?
Like high fever, chills, a stuffy nose with thick yellow mucus, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. That's the classic I'm sick feeling.
Right. So in that case, the focus would be on clearing that excess, getting rid of that burden on the body.
Addressing the root imbalance first.
Exactly. But let's say instead your cold presents with deficiency symptoms.
Like what?
Well, maybe a low-grade fever, fatigue, a runny nose with clear mucus. That suggests a lack of vital energy or fluids.
So it's less about attacking something and more about replenishing what's missing.
Exactly. In that case, you might focus on nourishing and strengthening the system first.
Makes sense. So you really have to adapt the treatment to what the body needs at that moment.
You got it. It's all about restoring that balance. But then there's this question of treating the symptoms themselves.
Yeah, because the text does acknowledge that sometimes you need to do that.
It does. There's a line that says, if fullness in the middle occurs as a result of the illness, treat the superficial manifestation.
Fullness in the middle. I'm not sure what that means.
Basically, it's referring to a feeling of bloating or discomfort in the abdomen.
Oh, okay.
So it's saying that sometimes relieving those symptoms is actually necessary to give your body a chance to regain balance.
So that you can then address the root cause more effectively. Interesting.
It's not always about ignoring symptoms. It's about knowing when to address them strategically.
And that seems to hinge on really paying attention.
Hmm.
Observation is key.
Absolutely. The text keeps coming back to that. Carefully examine the severity and mildness of symptoms to determine the appropriate approach.
It's like those TCM practitioners are detectives, gathering clues.
That's a great analogy, trying to understand the whole picture of what's going on.
Makes sense. So we're not just fighting our bodies, we're working with them.
Precisely. Now, before we move on, I'm curious. What are your initial thoughts on all this? What's standing out to you so far?
It's amazing how this chapter emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything. Like, it's not just about treating isolated symptoms.
Right.
It's about understanding how different systems in the body actually influence each other. Like we were just talking about diarrhea.
Yeah, and the text actually connects that to other things.
It does. There's this line that says, if obstruction of urination and bowel movements occurs first, leading to other illnesses, treat the root.
Okay, what's going on there? What's the connection?
Well, in TCM, we pay very close attention to urination and bowel movements. They're not just,
Bathroom stuff.
right.
Yeah.
But they're really vital indicators of how well your body is eliminating waste, maintaining balance.
So if those systems are off, it can cause problems elsewhere. Exactly. Think about it. If you're not eliminating waste efficiently...
It's got to go somewhere.
Exactly. Those toxins build up, and that can start to affect other organs, other systems.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about getting things moving again.
No, it's about understanding why the blockage occurred in the first place. What's the root cause?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It really shows how everything is connected. And speaking of connections, the text talks about how to approach treatment when you have both root and manifestation issues happening at the same time.
Right. It gets pretty specific about which you address first.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that in the outline. But can you walk us through that a bit more? How does that play out in real life?
Sure. Let's say you have headaches. Now, in TCM, there are all sorts of different types of headaches, each with their own causes.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But for this example, let's look at two common patterns. Liver fire rising.
Liver fire rising. Okay, that sounds intense.
It's actually very descriptive. In TCM, the liver is responsible for the smooth flow of qi, or vital energy, throughout the body.
Okay, so what happens when the liver fire rises?
Well, when liver qi gets stuck or becomes overactive.
It kind of flares up.
Exactly, like a fire. And that can cause symptoms like headaches, irritability, red eyes, even dizziness.
So it's like an excess of energy that's gone out of control.
That's a good way to put it. And in this case, the text tells us to treat the root first, then the superficial manifestation.
Meaning?
You'd focus on calming that liver fire, addressing that excess energy.
Before trying to get rid of the headache itself?
Exactly. Not just masking the pain, but really addressing the underlying issue.
I like that approach.
Yeah.
So what about the other type of headache you mentioned?
Right. Qi and blood deficiency. This one often feels dull, heavy, and it might come with fatigue, pale complexion, dizziness.
So the opposite of liver fire rising. It's more like a lack of energy.
That's it. And here, the text says to treat the superficial manifestation first, then the root.
So you would nourish and replenish qi and blood first.
Exactly. To support the body, give it the strength to then address that underlying deficiency.
So the treatment really flips depending on the underlying imbalance. Fascinating stuff.
It is. And this chapter goes even deeper. It reminds us that even within those excess and deficiency patterns, there are nuances. It goes back to that point about careful observation.
Yeah. Carefully examine the severity and mildness of symptoms to determine the appropriate approach.
Exactly. It's not a simple formula. There's a real art to TCM diagnosis and treatment.
I'm starting to appreciate that. So how do those nuances play out?
Well, the text says, mild symptoms suggest simultaneous progression. Severe symptoms require a singular focus.
Okay. What does that mean practically?
Well, let's think about those headaches again. If someone has mild, occasional headaches...
Nothing too debilitating.
Right. A practitioner might address both the root and the manifestation at the same time.
So, more gentle, balanced approach.
Exactly. But if those headaches are severe, chronic, really impacting someone's life...
You got to focus on the pain first.
You got it. That singular focus the text mentions. Address the most urgent thing first.
Like triage. Makes sense. So, you prioritize the immediate needs.
But you don't lose sight of that underlying cause. You'll address that once the immediate crisis is managed.
And it all comes back to that careful observation we keep talking about. So what about those urination and bowel movements? The text keeps mentioning those.
Right. Those are important. Remember, in TCM, we see the body as this interconnected whole.
Everything's related.
Exactly. And urination and bowel movements, they're like little windows into what's happening inside.
So it's not just about what's coming out.
No, it's about what that tells us about what's going on internally.
Okay, so how do we read those signals?
Well, the frequency, the color, the consistency, even the odor of your urine and bowel movements can tell us a lot.
About what?
About the state of your digestion, hydration, the balance of your internal organs.
Wow, I never realized there was so much information there.
There really is. And the text gives examples like, if urination is scanty and dark yellow, it suggests heat in the body.
Heat in the body.
Or, if bowel movements are loose and frequent, it could indicate dampness or spleen deficiency.
It's like a whole language our bodies are speaking.
It is. And understanding this language is essential for figuring out the right treatment approach. It really highlights the holistic, nuanced nature of TCM.
Yeah, this is incredible stuff. But before we get too carried away, I want to bring our listeners back in. What are your thoughts so far? What's resonating with you? You know, it's pretty amazing that these ancient texts are still so relevant today.
I know, right? Timeless wisdom.
We've been digging into this chapter, and it's like this whole new way of understanding how our bodies work.
It really is. And what strikes me is how it empowers us to be more proactive about our health.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
It's not just about receiving treatment passively. It's about understanding our bodies, making choices that support our well-being. And this chapter really emphasizes observation.
It does. Paying attention to all those subtle signals our bodies are sending.
Absolutely. In TCM, we talk about cultivating awareness of our internal landscape.
Our internal landscape.
Yeah, noticing changes in our energy levels, our digestion, sleep patterns, even our emotions.
Interesting.
Those little shifts can be early warnings, long before any major symptoms show up.
So it's like becoming our own health detective, noticing those clues, figuring out what they mean.
Exactly. And it starts with just paying attention. What sensations are you feeling? Any tension? Are you sluggish, energized? What are you craving?
Makes sense. Our bodies are always talking to us.
They are. And the more attuned we are to those messages, the better we can support our well-being.
It's about tapping into that inner wisdom.
Precisely. And that reminds me of one of the most thought-provoking lines in this chapter. Carefully examine the severity and mildness of symptoms to determine the appropriate approach. It's like it's telling us, hey, you have the power to influence your own health.
I like that. A call to action.
It is. It's about taking responsibility, making choices that align with our needs. And sometimes that means seeking professional help.
Right, this isn't about self-diagnosing serious conditions or anything.
No, not at all.
But it is about understanding our bodies so we can be informed partners in our own healthcare.
Exactly. And when you combine that self-awareness with the insights of TCM, it opens up so many possibilities for healing.
This has been such an incredible journey. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
There's always more to explore.
Right. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder. This chapter encourages us to carefully examine our own bodies.
A great reminder.
What subtle signs have you been ignoring? What's your body trying to tell you?
Those are powerful questions. Take some time to reflect on them. Listen to your body. Explore TCM. You have the power to unlock your own health and well-being.
Well said. And on that note, we'll conclude our deep dive into the spiritual pivot, the root of disease. We hope you enjoyed exploring this fascinating world of traditional Chinese medicine with us. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep listening to that wisdom within